Welcome back, everybody. Today, for this study, I'm going to be looking at a few scriptures. They're all in the book of Ecclesiastes. So if you don't have your Bible out, you know what to do. You got to press pause, get it out, get it in front of you. We're going to start in Ecclesiastes 1:14, and then we're just going to move through till we get to chapter 4. We're not reading through every chapter. We're just looking at a few things here, and we're going to be seeing how God makes sense of things. In the backdrop of all that I'm going to say, that's really the large piece of what I want us to hold on to for this study. So ready, set, go. Here we go. Ecclesiastes chapter 1, we're going to start in verse 14. And of course, we know this is Solomon writing the book of Ecclesiastes. I have witnessed all that is done under the sun. Indeed, all is fleeting, like trying to embrace the wind. Solomon says, I've seen a bunch. I don't know that he's trying to say so much that, that he's serious about, I've seen everything. He may feel like he's seen everything. Certainly, he was one of the wealthiest kings of his time, and so he had a lot of access to many, many different things. But he tells us here in verse 14, I witnessed all that is done under the sun, and indeed all is fleeting. Nothing has that permanence. Nothing has that anchoring effect like God does. God anchors us. The rest of all of life, we try to say, well, this means something, that means something, this work, this profession, this activity, this person. But Solomon says it's all fleeting. And again, I'm anchoring all this to that God makes sense of things. God is our anchor in this life. Let's keep walking down here to verse 17 in chapter 1. And again, write these down. I'll have it in the description as well down below the video, so you can go back through it and think this through for yourself. We're going to go through rather quick, but here we go. Ecclesiastes 1:17, I decided to study wisdom, and instead acquainted myself with madness and folly. It too seemed like trying to pursue the wind. Verse 18, for as my wisdom increased, so did my vexation. As my knowledge grew, so did my pain. And we know that we have the story about Solomon's before God. He could ask anything, and Solomon asked to be wise. But it isn't just that God took Solomon and poured wisdom into him. Being wise isn't getting something poured into you. It's more than just the knowledge itself. It's the proper application of it. It's understanding how things fit together. And so Solomon says, yes, God gave me this ability to see how things come together. That's wisdom. But for all that, I studied it. And it was just all the knowledge in and of itself, he says, is madness and folly. And the more his wisdom increased, so did his vexation. And his knowledge grew, so did his pain. Because you understand things, because you get up and you think about certain subjects, and you're like, okay, then this, then this. But the more you study it, there's a wider picture there. It's more complex than something so simple. And that's part of what Solomon is saying here. There's more complexity to this. Let's keep moving on. Ecclesiastes 2:11. As I continued musing over all I had accomplished and the hard work it took, I concluded that all this, too, was fleeting, like trying to embrace the wind. Is there any real gain by all our hard work under the sun. So here, work, because remember, in our society, Western society, we get part of our identity from what we do. So, that being said, if we throw ourselves into something and say that's our entire identity, what happens when we're not doing that? Do we disappear? Obviously not. But it causes this crisis. Then who am I? Who am I? Solomon doesn't stop there. We're going to go down to Ecclesiastes 2, verse 17. So I began to hate life itself because all that is done under the sun is so harsh and difficult. Life, everything about it, is fleeting. It's like trying to pursue the wind. The more that Solomon tried to grasp a hold and make it make sense, he's like, it just doesn't. Again, I really believe if you look at the entirety of Ecclesiastes, Solomon keeps coming back to God is the only anchor for us, for any of us, because all these other things, it's like chasing after the wind. Let's go up to 226. Let me find it here. To those who seek to please God, he gives wisdom and knowledge and joyfulness, but to those who are wicked, God keeps them busy harvesting and storing up for those in whom he delights. But even this is fleeting. It's like trying to embrace the wind. So if you're trying to please God, you're getting this wisdom and knowledge, and you're delighting in this service in itself for the enjoyment of itself without God, because that's really what he's pressing here. You're just pressing this activity of, I'm going to please God, I'm going to please God. Well, then we try to reason it out with our minds, what pleases God. If you were to think, let's just give an example. I don't know how you feel about cats, but if you flip a cat over on its back and start slapping it on the belly, you're probably going to get scratched, no matter how much you think in your own mind or might think, man, this cat is going to love this. Cat hate that. They are not going to like that. And so when we think about, in this instance here, seeking to please God, we really need to get to know God. And so Solomon, again, pointing us back to our anchor in this life, our anchor in our existence in eternity, is God himself, not our own intellect. As James would say, cogito ergo sum, I think, therefore I am. There's more than just the thinking. We've looked at 226. We're going to pop up here into Ecclesiastes 4:4. And this is where we're going to end. Then I saw yet another thing. Envy fuels achievement. All the work and skills people develop come from their desire to be better than their neighbors. Even this is fleeting, like trying to embrace the wind. So he says, I see another thing. Envy fuels achievement. I'm envious of Mr. XYZ, Miss XYZ over here because they're doing. I'd like to be doing more than them or as much as them. And so we're here, they're there, and so we fuel ourselves to get better. But he's like, okay, so now what? Now I'm better, now what? I'm still unsatisfied. It's still just like chasing the wind. Why? Again, because the whole of this is our anchor is God himself in this life and into the next. And without God as our anchor, when we try to start rationalizing things, everything falls apart. That's what Solomon says over and over and over again. We're just looking at these few little places here in Ecclesiastes for this study, but I want you to think about that. In your life, what are you chasing after? Because if it's just chasing after it without God, or if God's just kind of in the room, Solomon's saying it's like chasing the wind. Nothing. It's going to come to nothing. Because without God as your anchor, you're going to be like a feather on the wind. So think about that for yourself. What are your goals? What are your aspirations? What are you driving or striving after? If God is your anchor in the midst of that, then there is real gain. Then there is real achievement. Then there is this development of self in the soul. But without God as your anchor, a feather on the wind, like grasping after the wind. We can't grab the wind. We can wet a sheet and hold it up, and yes, the wind will blow that sheet. But it's just a sheet. It's not God. It's not our anchor. We need God as our anchor. So think about this as we're going forward and see what God speaks to you in your spirit of spirits as you walk through this study and think about it this week.